Barclay de Tolly, Mikhail Bogdanovich, Field Marshal of the Russian Empire. I believe he was one of the most overlooked and underrated heroes in Russian history. Here's why. When Napoleon invaded Russia in 1812, Barclay was the Russian Minister of War and the commander of the First Russian Army of the West, guarding Bielorussia. But as we can see, he mainly implemented a retreat strategy and avoided any major confrontations with Napoleon's army. The first major battle between the Russians and the French took place in Smolensk, but Barclay pretty much just burned half of the city and retreated further towards Moscow. And along the way, he implemented a scorched earth policy, burning all the crops, forcing all the civilians to move with his army. This created some indescribable disasters for the Russian civilians, and I thought this action was very extreme. But it was his main strategy of retreat that attracted oppositions from younger Russian generals like Pyotr Bagration and Alexei Yermolov. They thought this was a reluctance to fight and even accused Barclay of being afraid of Napoleon. So they appealed to Tsar Alexander I, who also happened to be a fan of Barclay's strategy, to replace him with the 67-year-old veteran Mikhail Kutuzov, and this was done on the 29th of August, 1812. However, to everyone's surprise, Kutuzov mainly carried on Barclay's strategy. He retreated the Russian army further along the Smolensk road because he thought Barclay had the right idea. He needed to avoid major confrontations with Napoleon's army to preserve the strength of the Russian army. However, he felt it was against the Russian people's will to give up Moscow without a fight, and this became known as the Battle of Borodino, which was a meat grinder for the Russians. The Russians suffered over 40,000 casualties, among them their favorite young general Pyotr Bagration. Therefore, Kutuzov and the Russian army abandoned Moscow. They left Napoleon with a burning city with absolutely no supply. And they themselves escaped further inland. And he also implemented some guerrilla tactics against Napoleon's army, of course, as we know it. After staying in Moscow for some time, Napoleon realized that there was no way he could locate the Russian army and destroy it, and there was no way of negotiating with Tsar Alexander I, so he led his army and turned away from Moscow in October 1812. Winter had come by that time, and with absolutely no food supply, and the Russian army chasing Napoleon, his Grand Army finally fell, and Napoleon lost most of his elite troops in Russia. I'm not going to get too deep into that. What I'm going to talk about here is how Barclay de Tolly's strategy tied into all of these. He wanted to avoid Napoleon's main forces back when it all started because he knew that Napoleon would want to confront the elite Russian forces and destroy it. Barclay wanted to preserve the main strength of his army, so he kept on retreating. Also, he wanted to lure Napoleon further and further into Russia because he knew that as the French army marched further and further into Russia, supply problem would become severe for them. Also, he destroyed all the food supplies along the way. And here I'm going to talk about some of the reasons why Napoleon's Grand Army was able to march across Europe while sustaining its fighting abilities. Two of the reasons. One, his army was able to find food wherever they conquered, and when Barclay took all the food supplies away, his army would automatically lose its fighting abilities. And two, his army had great disciplines, one of the best across Europe. And when there was lack of supply, it was not just food, equipments, ammunition as well. And when that was lost, his army lost the discipline, and therefore they became very vulnerable in front of the Russian army that was chasing them, of course. And therefore I believe Barclay de Tolly implemented the absolute correct strategy. He had a very thorough interpretation of the situation. His strategy was fortunately carried on by Mikhail Kutuzov, which led to the eventual defeat of Napoleon in Russia. And people really started to realize after Napoleon left Russia that Barclay was indeed correct. So in 1813, after the death of Kutuzov, Barclay was appointed again as the commander-in-chief of the Russian army. He led Russia's Great Foreign Campaign of 1813 and 14 and marched the army all the way into Paris. Due to his valiant actions, Barclay de Tolly was awarded the Order of St. George First Class in 1813, which made him one of the only four in Russian history to ever achieve the full Knight of the Order of St. George, the other three being his contemporary Mikhail Kutuzov and the Field Marshals von Dibich and Ivan Paskevich, who were great commanders during the Russo-Turkish War of 1829. When we actually look at the life of Barclay de Tolly, I personally think that he was very unfairly treated. Russian people at that time did not regard him as a heroic figure because they wanted to show Napoleon that they were not afraid of him, and Barclay's strategy was the exact opposite of that. Historians in the 19th century really favored Kutuzov and Bagration over him. I guess that was partly due to his Scottish descendancy. This was also why many Russian generals did not like him, because they thought Barclay did not understand Russia at all. It wasn't until recent decades that many more historians start to recognize Barclay's contribution in Russia's War of 1812. Different from many other Russian generals though, Barclay was actually a very good organizer and a good thinker. During his 4 years as the Russian Minister of War, he strengthened the Russian army's organization by writing a manual of generalship, and he even doubled the size of the Russian army. His contribution to the Russian army and to the Russian war effort was absolutely indispensable. So that is why when we think of the War of 1812, we think of Kutuzov, Bagration, and now we'll always remember Field Marshal Mikhail Bogdanovich Barclay de Tolly.